I'm Joe Johnston. I'm here for the UX multi-device applications. I'm from a company called Universal Mind. If you're not familiar with them, we're a digital solutions agency, and we create software applications, a wide variety of them, from the web to desktop to inside of automobiles. So we have a wide range of experiences throughout a lot of different types of applications. So I'm going to get right into it and kind of explain what a multi-device application is. And we talked, obviously you've been to FITC, the sessions throughout the rest of the last 2 days. And you've gotten to see a lot of talking about phones and iPads and tablets and the new Samsung Galaxy Tab out there, which is a pretty neat device, and Android and all the different types of platforms. Well, I wanted to change it up a little bit and showcase that it's more than just those mobile devices that we think about every day. It's something else, and obviously we all probably familiar with Netflix. I'm sure a lot of us have used it before in a number of different devices. If you've seen my blog before, I did a little post in this talking about a little case study for the Wii, for Netflix and the different types of devices that it's on. And obviously the Wii, Xbox, TiVo, Blu-ray, the iPhone, the iPad, the web, and then obviously there's others, the little Roku box, and a bunch of different ones. And I'm sure there's a ton more getting ready to come out because Netflix has kind of become the Twitter of build an app for that to pick their device to be able to use it. But I wanted to pinpoint out the Wii and the Xbox, if one of the two more popular ones, because a lot of us have used the Xbox before. Well, I'm assuming a lot of people use Xbox and probably the Wii, or at least experienced it. The two devices are from Netflix are very similar, but you'll notice that they're very much used to the normal UI of what an Xbox would be, let's say. As you can see, the Xbox has this card cover flow, which is used throughout the entire navigation throughout the gaming system. So when somebody turns on Netflix and wants to watch a movie or try to find a movie, they're very used to the UI that's there. Their affordances are always, they use the X, Y, and B button to go back and forth. They can slide through the different cards. They're very much used to that interface. Same thing goes with the Wii. It's a simpler interface, but it's very Wii-like. So it has a little bit bigger buttons for the affordances for the large, or for the controller and the gestures that you'll use to try to find those. And they're slim. Both of them, as you can see, are slimmed down. If you're used to going to Netflix on the website, you'll be able to see that it has a lot more stuff on it. You'll be able to give reviews, see reviews, read reviews, star certain things, add it to your queue, all this crazy stuff. Well, you really can't do that with Xbox and Wii because they specifically built it to watch movies. So you can kind of see that this direction from an entertainment world is going to be able to bleed across a wide variety of devices or applications that we try to build as developers or designers. And as you can see, there's obviously TiVo. It looks like a normal TiVo, the Blu-ray, the PlayStation, and the one I dislike the most is probably the iPad because they had such a great chance to be able to create something really compelling and engaging, but they decided to almost put the website inside of a HTML control on the web or on the iPad, which is a little disappointing. They did a much better job, or at least a little better job, with the iPhone. So if you guys experienced that Netflix application on the iPhone, it's a very, very interesting application. And it's also great for kids. If you're on the go, you can have a little movie pop on, and kids can watch it. So it's a great device. So I kind of get a little example of what a multi-device application is from an entertainment world. I'm going to talk a little bit about I'm going to get into a case study that we did. If you were in Brian O'Connor's session earlier, talk about a fictitious telecom company. We do a lot of telecom clients of ours, so we have a lot of experiences with that type of industry. So we built a case study around that. I'll get that in a second. But we're going to go through some of the challenges, and I think this question has probably come up in a lot of sessions that I've seen, is the wide variety of devices, and how do you pick what device to target? Or even if you're building a HTML web application, you still have to know what target device you're going to put that on, or at least guess what device that is going to be on. And there's a lot of questions. I mean, it goes back to everybody has a very intimate personal relationship with their device, whether it's, and particularly with phones. The iPad's a little bit more of a family-oriented or more of a more than one person type of interaction model. But the phones we have now today have several layers of our information on it, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's banking information with Mint, whether it's emails that you have with your company. So there's several layers of information there that we feel that are ours. So we have this conversation a lot, and Brian and I have had this conversation quite a few times, is let's say it's 100 degrees out and you're on a jog, or running or something, and you're pretty sweaty, right? Or if you run into somebody that's jogging and forgot their phone and say, hey, wait a minute, I need to give somebody a call, so they stop you on the street. and they say, hey, can I borrow your phone? How many people would just hand over their phone and allow somebody that's sweating to slap it up to their face and decide to use it, and then you're like, okay, give it back. So you don't really find too many people that are just willing to give their phone away to use it. There's too much information on that. So that goes along with applications. So we have to really think about if someone has an Android device, they become attached to it. They're very much of a follower of an Android type of interface to applications, to the marketplace. Same goes with, of course, we know the Apple fanboys. So the iPhones and the iPads, they're very much used to that interface. So we have to start building applications and thinking about those affordances that an iPhone person has compared to an Android person. You can give somebody an Android device and say, hey, can you go look up somebody's contact information on my Android? If they're an iPhone user, it's going to take them a little while to figure that out. It's a little different. And same goes for an iPhone or an Android person to jump over to an iPhone. The affordances are just a little different. So you have to take that in consideration when you're building applications to make sure if your target audience, and this is going to get back into a lot of questions that are answered through a lot of the presentations that were here this weekend, was your users. Your users are the target. And that's what you want to target as the users and not necessarily the device. Once you target your users, you'll figure out what device those users are using, and then you're going to get the most bang for the buck. So it's the whole 80-20% rules. Hit your 80% with the most bang. So, and you have to really pay attention to if you are going to build HTML5, we'll get into this a little bit more, you are going to sacrifice a little bit of the user experience when it comes to a particular device. Because as we all know, it's not the same on every single device. So getting back to, I'll have a slide later with HTML5 versus the native stuff, but talking about native applications, these are specific iPhone applications, but you get the idea from talking about a native UI versus a custom UI. And what I mean by that is on the left here, we have more of the standard UI controls that are used on standard, in this case, iPhone applications. So you have a list and you have the tab bar at the bottom. Those are user experience or UI metaphors that an iPhone person is going to automatically pick up. So they launch your app, they know exactly what to do. They know a list you can scroll, you can probably tap on a list. iPhone has quite in-depth guidelines on whether or not to use certain icons in certain situations. So they know those affordances, like the little chevron arrow up top there, knows they're going to go to another list of information. The stuff on the right is more custom UI. So you have Epicurious, and I believe the name of that application is called Units. And they're very well done, but they have to take consideration they're different. If you were to look at that app, do you know that that's a list that you can click on? You may or may not. They do have a little bit of affordances that is a button that you can click on. So there's some, but you're still going to have a little bit of time to investigate that application. So you're going to play around with it and try to figure out what it does. And if you want your application to be something like that, that's fine. You just have to know that that's what your goal is. But if you want something that somebody can pick up and run with it automatically, sometimes those native UI controls will help you out a lot. And that comes into even more play when you're building the one application that'll spread across multiple devices. So the big question is, that'll answer a lot of the other questions, technology, what device, how do I plan my deployment or whatever you want to do, is the users. So this is one of the big things that I'll talk a lot about, and a lot of people sometimes say they know their user. Well, some people do, and obviously there's a lot of people that don't. But the users are going to help define what that technology is. And there's several different ways. I'm going to get into this once we get into the case study, how to define who your users are and what they use and how they use it. There's stats you can use. There's different types of information. Those are just one piece of the puzzle. So don't just rely on, if I do have a HTML5 or an HTML application running, and you say, well, 90% of the people are in the account screen. Well, that's great that you're getting a lot of traffic to one particular screen, but do you know why? So that's the big question, is to figure out why people are going there so you can actually build an application that they really want to use. And this goes back to, you could find out that if somebody's using your app on a mobile phone, they may be hitting it 5 seconds, maybe 100 times a day, or it might be 100 seconds one time a day. So knowing those trends will help you define what your application needs to do and how it needs to work. And defining the users is really going to help you do that. And there's also a lot of other things with context scenarios that you can do, which I'm going to get into a second. So to help kind of talk about some of the challenges, we at Universal Mind created a strategy for a multi-device strategy, which this was the screen's a little dark. Oh, by the way, at the end of the session, feel free to come up and bum rush me or Brian here, my colleague. We have the devices on our phones and our iPads up here, so we'll be willing to show you up close. It's a little easier to show some of the applications. up close than it is on the screen. Of course, I have a video, which may not run very well, but so we created an application natively across, as you can see, all the devices. So we have an Android, iPhone, iPad. There's a flash multi-touch screen that was built in Air 2 using all the gesture support. And that's running on an HP Touch Smart. It's a 24-inch screen. I couldn't bring that with me. It was a little too big to cram in the airplane. But we have an HTML5 application, a Flex application, and we do have a Silverlight application that's being currently built. So we have this single application running on all these different devices. And it's pretty impressive to see them all. If I had them all lined up here, it's pretty impressive. And all the data is real data coming from our partner supplying all the data. So when you log in as Bob or Dave or whoever you're logged in as a certain user, you'll see all the same information across all the devices. I have a little video here I'm going to play that shows all of the interactions of each device. That's a little video. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Brian. So that was a little video showcasing, a little easier to show a video with all the devices rather than trying to cram them all up here. So let me get into just kind of the steps from a user experience design process that we did. Obviously, there was some brainstorming up front here, which I don't show, but I'll show another application that we kind of thought of when we built this. But so there's some brainstorming, whiteboarding, trying to figure out what this thing is. We were kind of our own clients, so we kind of played dual roles in this type of project, but obviously working with ourselves, and we created the idea for the application. And what we decided to do is, as we do with all our projects, to create what we call personas. And if you don't know the term personas, they're basically just what they call archetypes of a group of people. So basically a group of people represents one of these, and I have 4 personas here. So I'm not going to get too in-depth with the personas, but one is a stay-at-home mom, one is a businessman, one is a younger individual, and then another one is more of a techie type of person. So we kind of grouped our users into those 4 categories. And what we do this for, which is really important, is once you create these personas, and as you can see, they have a picture, they have a name, they even have email addresses, and they have a little backstory of what each persona is. It really gives you what we like to call empathy into the user. So when you're creating these applications, you're not creating for yourself, you're creating for those people. So what we really try to do is when we're in these meetings, or if we're doing brainstorming, or if we're working with a client in a UX meeting trying to figure out what the application should do down the road, and if we find the client or the people that we're working with saying, well, I would want it to do this way, or if it were me, I want it to do this, we try to correct them and say, well, what would Bob do? What would Megan do? What would Dave do? And then once we convert them later on in the presentation, or later on in the project, they actually start saying, well, don't you think Dave would approach it this way, or don't you think Megan would do it that way? And that's what we really want to do. We want to take a step back, and even ourselves, this helps ourselves as well, because we're designers, and you guys are probably developers and designers. You guys want to put your worth into that as well, but this allows you to take a step back and actually build an application for your personas, because a lot of times we build applications that are maybe enterprise level, which we may not have anything to, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a person, I'm not a person that runs in CRM all day long inside of a large, $1 million, multi-million-dollar enterprise that has to keep track of sales and everything. So we create personas to help get into the shoes of the users. And the way we create personas is quite in depth with user interviews, several different types of user research on site with people using existing applications. So we figure out who those users are, create personas around them, And then this helps us guide the application and building it. So we always refer back to the persona when we build anything. And this also goes in a development process as well. As Brian can attest, we create in the agile process that those guys use inside of the development. They create user stories that are defined based on our personas. So the full cycle is kind of within inside of here. So based on the user personas, we create context scenarios. And in this case, we created more of an ecosystem story because we kind of wanted to tell a story with all the devices. But you can create context scenarios for each persona, or each persona could have multiple context scenarios. So if you had a stay-at-home mom, they could have 5 context scenarios throughout their interaction, but it's still the same persona. We just targeted 4 stories for each individual user, and they kind of targeted the device in this case, even though they can branch and go across devices. So the younger individual may not have a credit card and wants to go up in front of the kiosk and add money to their pay-as-you-go plan. So this kiosk may be inside of a movie theater, or inside of a mall, or something like that. The other ones are more specific towards actual seeing what their account information is and stuff like that. I'm not going to read the personas, or the context scenarios. They're pretty non-interesting. So basically now we start getting into wireframe. So when we wireframed the whole experience, we wireframed every single device before we even got into designing anything. So we wireframed and figured out what every single device needed to do. And the Android and iPhone obviously are very similar, so they have very similar functionality. You'll see once I show a demo of the Android and iPhone, very similar, but the interactions are a little bit different because they're built natively for an Android user, natively for an iPhone user. But they have the same content. So you can just see a real quick snap. Obviously, there's several hundred more wireframes, or I'm not sure how many in this case. But so this was a basic wireframe for an iPhone. And what we really wanted to convey on a mobile, on-the-go type of situation is they just want to check their bill if they happen to need to pay their bill. And also what we tried to show in here, which is a little Big Brother-ish, it's called what we call a family locator. So it's this idea of if other people in your family have other mobile devices, they can send their location back to this device and you can see where all your family members are to try to keep track of everybody if you happen to do some things like that. So we have some other types of things that may come in here. So those are the 3 main functionalities that are in the phones themselves. And again, you can see here's another wireframe. I have a bunch of resources at the end of the slide to help kind of point. I don't have the slide, or I don't have the links. I can probably put that on my blog when I post the presentation. But there's a bunch of different, if you're into wireframing, there's a ton of different resources online. They'll help you out with the shells of almost every single device known to man. That'll help you start wireframing some information. So here's Android. Again, this is more of a used on-the-go type of thing. Here's your native. As with the iPhone, it's flip-flopped. The native experience tabs at the top, very similar to how the contacts work on the Android. And of course, there's no need for a back button on the Android device because it's an actual tactile button at the bottom. A little different with the iPhone. Another type of key user experience aspect is back and forth and navigating through hierarchies is a little different throughout the Android than it is to the iPhone due to the back button and the tactile buttons at the bottom with the menu. So you can really reduce the amount of information on the screen of an Android because you can rely on some of the menuing buttons at the bottom to help convey some different types of information. Then we get into the iPad. So this one was a little bit of a interesting because it's still playing itself out as what the iPad is actually used for. As you can see, the other ones were more of this on the go. This one's when you're used on the couch. So kind of think of it as a device like that. And so we kind of wanted to bleed and not show everything that the web could do, but just enough to where you could do everything and a little more than what a phone could do. We could essentially replace the entire web experience and put it on the iPad, but in this case, we didn't want to go that far with that type of device. This one has a little bit more interaction with the maps and kind of starts getting into the messages and also some different types of contacts that you might have inside of your system, pulling it in natively from your contact form. Same thing with the interaction for the HP Touch Smart. This one's a little different. This one actually, we're targeting a younger individual or a person that doesn't have a phone. They could come up, interact with the touchscreen display, and actually, as you saw in the video, you could pick a phone and kind of do a phone order. If you're a person that always uses their on-the-go phone, or if you're just a person that doesn't use very much text messaging, it would serve up a phone for you, and then you'd be able to click it. And we spun the iPhone, you could see kind of a 360 display of it. And then also you could log in and you could input money into the system, and it would add minutes to your phone if you didn't have a real plan or didn't have a credit card or didn't have different types of information. So that's kind of the stages that we went through, and then we actually obviously developed and built everything natively. But this gets into more of the execution of how you approach some things that we found out when we built the telco application and are now other applications, that less is more in mobile. So here's some key things you can do is that you don't, obviously, as I said before, you don't need everything that's on the web and just slap it on the phone. I think almost every single presentation I've been to has said that same exact thing. And I think a lot of people are getting that. And it goes back to figuring out your users, what they want to use it for. Those are the things you want on the mobile device. And remember, it's on the go device. You don't need everything, even though a lot of clients will say, we need to have this on there, we need to have that. It's what you can remove is the key, not really what you can add. There's some other kind of tips and tricks to kind of implement. Is obviously you want to try to use as much aggressive auto completion, so the less typing a user has to do, the better. Obviously typing on a lot of the devices are a little tricky, so try to reduce all that, try to use combo box drop downs, menuing, selecting type of things. So also you can flatten the hierarchies, and that goes again to not adding everything from the web, so you actually can remove that, put them as, that's why the tab navigator on the iPhone is so popular, because it forces you to flatten the hierarchy. So there is no drill into second menus, third menus, fourth menus, then you have to back your way out. So if you can flatten that hierarchy, it's going to make it that much more efficient on the iPhone or Android or whatever mobile device. And that goes again with truncating interfaces as well. And that goes along with the UI of the rest of the iPhone and Android mobile applications. Another key thing to think about is connectivity. So what happens when a device isn't connected to anything? There's no Wi-Fi, there's no 3G, there's no Edge, there's nothing. Here's a little sample of what the App Store does. It just gives you a logo that says you're not connected. If that's the experience they wanted, that's the experience they're going to serve up. So you just got to remember that people aren't always connected all the time. So make sure you think about what data do you need to display, how you want to display it. And with native applications, you can cache a lot of that. And I know with HTML5, you can cache a limited amount. So remember what you want to keep to show when the phone isn't connected or device is not connected to the world. And also another key thing is when building native applications and some web applications, how do you handle notifications? So let's say you build a phone that has some sort of notifications that you're using the phone, and let's say for the telco application we had alerts to come up and say, oh, your bill is due in 3 days or whatever. Very similar to how, if you guys are familiar with Mint, they'll do messages and alerts to tell you things. So how does that type of experience affect you? And also how does updates, so how does your application update? With the App Store, obviously, I think there was a few conversations we had earlier this week about the App Store is really efficient at letting you know when your application is updatable. So it really forces the user to see, oh, I have 12 applications, I can go through those and see what's updated. Same with the marketplace as well. It'll let you know when you get into HTML5 applications, it gets a little tricky. The user has to go to the website themselves, and then, oh, it looks like they changed some things. They don't really know what's changed. So native applications allow more a little flexible information based on updates. And then again, based on reorientation and basically reorganizing the content based on landscape or portrait for a lot of the devices. So don't just reorient the content that's on the screen. You can add and remove content based on landscape or portrait orientations, and I'll show that here in a second. Let me show some of the apps here, and then I'll get into the rest of these. So if you want to switch over, I'll jump in. And I know it may be a little blurry, but like I said, stop us afterwards. We'll show you the application here. Let me start it up again. It's probably a little bit of a glare from that. It's a little blurry, but we'll see if we can get through it here. The white's a little washed out, but you'll see. So I'll just log in here. Take a second to log in. There we go. So now I logged in as Bob. You might be able to not see that too well, but so you can kind of see. I can rotate this. It's going to reorient the screen, and we're going to reload our content to kind of fit more of a landscape. And obviously these lists are scrollable, and we can go through our messages. If I wanted to, I could actually pay my bill, slides up, and it says, oh, okay, I have $211, and I can type in I don't really need to type in an amount here, but then the auto completion, I can pick my accounts. So it's just a simple scroll wheel there to do that, and I can make a payment, and then confirmation is sent that a payment has been sent. I can view a statement here, and this pulls in a PDF, so can't see it very well, but it pulls in a PDF of the most recent bill up to that point. And then you'll see this also on the iPhone and Android. So that's and then obviously we have the map, so I can zoom in, and I can click on a person and see where they are. So let me show you, that's the iPad application. Let me show you the Android. Oh, geez. How about that, Brian?
Yeah,
He just showed me that today. So I'm going to log in as Bob, as you can see. I don't need to do a password, obviously. It's a fictitious type of person. So then you can see, boy, that's really hard to see. So I can still pay my bill, view my statement. So if I wanted to, I'll pay my bill. If I click it here, it slides off to the right. Now, there's no back button and there's no other navigation, but I'll just pay my bill. I don't think it really does anything in this one. Then if I wanted to go back, obviously I can hit the back button at the bottom, the tactile button, and go back. And then there's also my usage. So there's that graph again we're showing, and that shows the date at the bottom. And then also the friends. So we added my bill, my usage, and friends, and I can zoom into this. So this is pulled in the same Bob information, and that's the particular users that are also showed on the iPad that I just showed. And then I'll show the iPhone. So I'll launch the Telco app. This one takes a second for some reason. Earlier it was, I'm not sure if my wireless and this is a little slower or. Should load. Hopefully. Crossing my fingers. There we go. So again, Bob, layout's a little different, but it's all the same content. Pay my bill, view my bill. And then this, when I pay my bill, as you can see, we do the same slide as a normal iPhone, but now we have my bill up at the top, so that's how I get back. So same interactions, just different, specifically built for the iPhone and then Android. And then obviously my usage and the friends for the, and then this one I can actually pick on a person and call it since it's an iPhone phone device. So those are the three that I have with me. Obviously I don't have the kiosk with me, but if you want to switch back, go ahead. I'll continue on here and get to the good stuff. So I'm going to go through a little bit quicker with these next two slides because there's two things I want to show that are pretty fun. So when you start building an application, really think about what the input is. So obviously the iPhone applications and iPad applications, we have to deal with the hand, and that's something that a lot of us aren't used to. And there's also a wide variety of other types of input devices. So we have, as you can see up here, we have a VUI, TUI, and GUI. So we have voice, we have tactile, and we have graphical. So when you start dealing with, some applications are starting to utilize voice commands, or I know that somebody saw, if you guys saw the Adobe, a couple of Adobe guys, they had an application where we actually blow on the phone and actually blew up a balloon. So there's some different types of applications that are starting to incorporate voice or some sort of audio type of thing. And we have to think about, obviously, touch, multi-touch, the virtual and the physical keyboard. So on the iPhone, you have to know that a keyboard is going to slide up. So what does that cover up when I'm typing in something? So you don't want to cover up something that is fairly important that they have to type in. And also, this goes along with some of the physical keyboards as well. So when you open a keyboard, what happens? There's some events that get fired that since you open the keyboard, now something needs to happen. And then I have some really weird, bizarre patent images here showing some, I've always fascinated how people draw hands on patents, particularly that one way over in the right. I'm not sure whose monkey hand they use, but it's very large. It kind of freaks me out every time I see that one. But if you want to have a fun time, just search patents and look mobile patents and Google images, and you'll find a wide variety of interesting images. But definitely be aware where your hand is when you're using it, because there's a lot of applications that there's a list and you want to click on something. We're so used to, menu items dropping down. Well, obviously, if you have a phone and you want to click on an item and the menu drops down, where's your hand? Your hand's right over the top of the menu you're looking at. Or if you need to do something where your hand is, so you may have to think about putting things above, which is a little out of the norm. But so just be cautious of where your hand is. And that goes as well for the iPads and tablet devices that are going to be aplenty coming in the next few months. So that's some things to think about. Obviously, there's no right way or wrong way, but definitely try to make it the best for your users, because that's the key. I'm just going to skip through. Here's a little HTML5 matrix that was in Brian's slides. If you're going to use HTML5 in web, I know I talked a lot about native applications. There are some pros and cons to both. Obviously, native, the cost of updating and deploying several different types of platforms. But there's also a lot of cons and pros to the HTML5 world as well. So just be wary of what you pick and what your limitations are. That's really the key thing. And if you don't need some of the native stuff, then a web application may be your key application to go with. Here are some resources, as I said. So when you're building any native application, this goes as well for web applications as well, if you're going to start making them feel more more native-like. And on my stance on the native versus web type of application standpoint, if it looks native, wants to act native, then it should be native. That's the way I look at it. So the user's going to think the app's native anyway, so it might as well be. Granted, I know there's a lot of budget concerns and stuff with that, but I'm on the UX side, so I can throw that around a little bit. So here's some references. There's the iPhone, Android, there's the RIM, and then I put the Windows 7. There's also a lot of other references. I can add some other graphical wireframing or graphical types of things that people have created to help facilitate creating visual comps and layouts of different things. So and then I want to do one more thing. Here at Universal Mind, from the UX team, we created an app called iBrainstorm. If you want to flip over to that, it's basically a creative collaboration tool that we use based on another UX process called sketchboarding. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it or not, but we use these large, huge sheets of butcher paper. We put sticky notes and we draw on them. We roll them up, take them to the client, and then we bring them back and unroll them. And they're plastered all over our UX studio. Probably won't be able to see it too well, but as I said before, feel free to grab us or come up here and we'll show you. But the cool thing with it is it's just an idea generation. So I can actually add sticky notes here. So I can just add a little sticky note and I can type in here. So if you just had the iPad, there's just the use case for the iPad where I can zoom in and I can draw some stuff and say it needed to look like this and this went to that. And then I actually obviously have an eraser up there. I can delete some things. But the cool thing is there's an iPhone companion. So what I can do is I can download the iPhone companion and the iPad application. And so I have the iBrainstorm here on the iPhone. And now it's saying I can connect to this. I can hit this connect button up in the iBrainstorm iPad app. And I hit the connect button on my iPhone, and my name shows up here. And now I'm connected to this particular iPad application. Let me go in here and I'll just select all this stuff. And I'll just cut it and I'll say hello. And then what I can do, I can just basically flick this over there and there it goes. So kind of hard to show both of them at the same time. Here, see if I can. So if I flick this, you'll see that it, and you can connect up to 4 iPhones to this. This is using the GameKit OS that's inside of the iOS development platform. So people can sit around the room and flick messages to one person that's running the iPad and then start collaborating around a particular idea. We do have, the cool thing is, Brian's team is building an Android version of this, so we'll have an Android device that'll be able to connect to the iPad. So, and that will be unlimited. This also works in Wi-Fi. I'm using the Wi-Fi here now. If I didn't have Wi-Fi access, I could use Bluetooth. So there are little restrictions to the Bluetooth, but It's up to 30 feet, so it's a really cool collaboration tool. We've used it several times in a lot of clients, and it's come in really handy. And I'll get back to the slides here in a minute, but there's definitely a bunch of different ways we can send an email. We can save it to our photos as well, so that's how we can export this image after we're done. I want to flip back to the presentation. There's some numbers I wanted to go over with this particular application. We submitted the app July 19th. Well, we submitted it 8 days before. We had it accepted in the store 8 days later, July 19th. So we really didn't know what to expect when we first launched this application into the App Store. We figured, hey, maybe we'll get a couple thousand downloads. Great. The first week we had 39,000 downloads, with almost 40, and we were pretty blown away. The second week we had almost 90. We had 94,000 downloads. So at that point we were pretty much either thinking that the App Store was broken for some reason, or there was something totally wrong. But apparently those numbers were correct. So it kept on growing up and up. We were number one in the productivity category for iPad for several weeks, and we got up to number 3 in all free iPad apps for a couple, I think it was a week about. So it was about the same time Flipboard, if you guys know what Flipboard is, they were doing it at the same time. So we had kind of jumped back and forth with Flipboard several times. But we had a lot of success with it. We had a lot of people download it. The first update we did, and this is kind of the telling sign when we found out that it's nice to have a bunch of downloads, but you know how many people, it's the whole track of a bunch of people download apps and then they delete them. Well, it's the telling sign is how many people actually update your application when you have a update come out. We had nearly 40,000 people updated our first update. So kind of a telling sign. And right now I think the total updates overall are 130,000. So that's like telling us we have about that many people, if not more, that have updated and still continue to use it. And we still get emails every single day, and we get comments, and done quite a few interviews with some other people about it. So it's been a great app. To date, we have almost 400,000 downloads. So, and this goes back to Brian had in his session about scalability and knowing the scale. So just make sure you think about an app you may put on the App Store may actually take off like wildfire. So that's iBrainstorm. Feel free to come up after the session. I can show you some more of that. I do have one more other thing. I don't know if anybody has seen any of the tweets that I've been doing, but we actually had the chance to put together a iPad application for Lady Gaga's Fame Monster. Lady Gaga had a collector's album that she did for Fame Monster, and she wanted a digital version of that. So we worked with Interscope Records, IGA, her record label, and we created a concept for her. The cool thing with this is, if anybody's familiar with Adobe at all, Adobe has a digital publishing framework. If you guys have seen the Wired application, it's using that exact framework. So we worked with Adobe on that platform to create a Lady Gaga digital version of her collector's box set. And the neat thing is, there was 0 Objective-C code written, and this was all done in Adobe InDesign. Adobe InDesign, and then there's 2 additional Air applications that help package up the files to create the iPad app to be able to install it and include a couple assets. So if you want to flip over, this is probably not going to look very good on here, but audio. Oh yeah, that's right. I need to flip over the audio. Thank you, Brian. Let me plug in my audio here. So I'll go through it, but it's going to look much better if you guys huddle around me after the session. So you see this thing right here. I don't know if you can read it or not. It says Adobe Preview. I'll launch that. And that says Digital Preview Tool. So this is the concept we had for Lady Gaga. If you're familiar with her, I'm sure you are. She's always old bad usually, but she does have a semi-good side and a really bad side. So, and she talks about the whole yin and yang in her research in finding out about her for this particular project. So the idea was in the app, throughout the whole entire app, if you look at it in landscape mode, it's more of the nice side of Lady Gaga, but if you turn it vertically, you see the more or less the naughty side of Lady Gaga. So if it doesn't do much now when I rotate it left, up and down for landscape portrait, and this is just the first screen, but if I start going through, you'll see, and all the assets were created by the UX team. We didn't receive any assets from Lady Gaga. They wanted us to go rampant and create a creative style based on her digital content. So we took a lot of content that we found and tried to represent her as best we could. So you'll see a lot of the design was a little unique, and then if I flip this, you'll see the part here. And that actual animation was originally created in Flash, brought in InDesign as a series of images, and you'll see how that kind of plays in a couple other aspects of things. So that's just a series of images looping over and over and over again, and that's inside of a control that you add as a plugin inside of Adobe InDesign. And then I'll go back. And then now we'll get into, actually let me start over here, I was in here earlier. So this is the first thing called creating a monster. And then we can swipe down, very similar if you've seen the wired application, very similar interaction. And you can add these interactive elements, so I can tap inside of this particular, and I can move this around. It's showing some of her inspiration. I can actually zoom out and zoom back in, and you can see a little part of her there. So it's a little fun interactive piece. I can scroll down again. It's another interactive element. I can flip through her many pictures. And then one more. This is we took this from the YouTube video, found it on YouTube. Did it for one of her videos. But the cool thing is you can tap inside of here and you can actually rotate it through with your finger, which is kind of cool. So there's plenty of, and this again is just a series of images that are just stitched together. And let me go up here. So if I were to rotate this vertically, you would see the naughty side. So then there's a little bit more of this cord is in the way. So there's a little bit of the naughty side of her. And same content, just laid out a little bit more risque. Again, seeing some of the images there. And then you can actually add photo galleries type of images. So I can click on, and that actually changes the image there on the side. And then we can also embed video. So this is going to autoplay. Can't see it because it's kind of dark. It's actually a live recording from one of her shows. But I can click on it and actually go full screen on it. So we can embed video assets. I can go back down. I'll stop that. And then I can play more later for sure. But let me go back here. So the other thing you can do is you can incorporate HTML5. Several different ways to do it, but one of the ways we did it here was we did it as basically a launch out element. So we created a thing called Social Monster, which is pulling in her Twitter feeds, and I'll hit launch here. And it's going to load her Twitter feed information, but we've kind of organized it in a way where it looks a little bit better. My wireless is a little slow here, but you'll see that, and you can't see the text, obviously, because it's gray, and the background's black. Oh, there it goes. So we kind of organize it, and you can send a tweet here, and I'm not sure who it's logged in as, but that's kind of the running tweets of Lady Gaga here. And as you can see, it's in horizontal mode. This is all HTML5, just loaded inside of this particular, and it's just a link you put in there to an HTML5 site that we created. And then if I rotate it, the HTML5 should read the rotation and reorganize the content so it fits vertically as well. So that's all the orientation captures inside of the HTML5. And it's just being shown inside of more or less a HTML control inside of the application. So I can hit done on that. And then we also she had a puzzle inside of her collector's item too. So I'm actually going to show this in portrait mode because it shows a little bit better. I can launch that, and that's a similar type of thing. This is just if you've ever played one of those slide puzzle games, this is basically what it is with one of her crazy Hello Kitty images. And I can click on these, and it's basically just going to push it down and move over. It's loading the back image. That's why it took so long. I'm not very good at these games. So, but you get the idea. If you do it all, if you make the image, it actually congratulates you with a video. So you get to see a behind-the-scenes video of the app of Lady Gaga. Another one is, let me actually go back up here. So on the road, we did a thing where it was the day in the life of a monster. She had this whole terminology of monster. She called everybody monsters, little monsters, if you're familiar with her, for the monster ball thing. So this is where we're actually embedding HTML5 directly into the page, so you can do that as well. So that's just fading in and fading out Twitter feeds. And this gives some information about her particular tour. There's a scrapbook. So in I think she had a bunch of behind-the-scenes photos, her little sketches and drawings. But you can tap inside here, and you actually can move this whole thing around, and actually can. So it's a really big image, but you actually can play with all the little scratchings she wrote about rings, and she came up with the idea for the glasses and all this different kind of fun stuff. So it's a very interactive, engaging type of magazine or type of collector's edition. And then there's also pictures. So this is actually, if I go up here, it's Monster Photos, it's called. And I can just click, this is just a photo gallery. That's another control actually in the digital publishing framework. You add a series of images to it, and it'll just basically show you different ways to show images. Very similar to how I showed the numbers 1, 2, 3 on the original one, or on the first couple pages. This is just a different way to display images. And if I do the vertical, you'll see here's the naughty side, of course. And then you can do the same thing. We just move the images at the bottom here. Rotate it back here, and then, whoopsie, there we go. We created a little, you can also add interactive elements. I just tapped on that, and it shows a little equalizer type of thing. But this isn't real, this was just a concept. We could play with her music and create a mixer type of, and there's the good one, and then obviously the bad one has like spider webs and stuff on it. So kind of an interesting play on the equalizer. And then we did Monster Outfit. She had a paper doll inside of her collector's edition too. So we created a paper doll. This doesn't work either, but you could actually, obviously, this could be an HTML embedded part here where you could actually click and drag and put different clothes on her as well. And here's a naughty version, of course, with all the naughty garments, I guess you could call them, on this one. And then there's, I believe, one more page. So this one has a little behind-the-scenes video. This was a idea that we had for if you were to pay for this app, you would get exclusive behind-the-scenes footage, and you would pay extra for it. So this is like a behind-the-scenes video of how she created a lot of her videos for Fame Monster. Again, I can go in here and actually can. The cool thing with this is that while the video is playing, I can actually rotate this. And the video doesn't ever stop. It just continues to play. And you can, which is kind of cool. So if I were to, it just reorientates itself and continues to play. So this video goes on for a little while. And I believe that's the last. And then we ended with a little note by her little note that she gives out to her little monsters. So as you can see, if you've seen the Wired app, it's very similar. I can scrub here at the bottom. It'll show me a little thumbnail of where I'm at. So these are the native controls inside of the Adobe Digital Publishing Framework. So we didn't build any of this stuff. This is the stuff that comes with the framework. So I can jump to a page. But there's also, if you want to look at it in a different view, which is, here, let me scroll down to some of these beginning of the pages. It looks a little better. So if I were to go back here, you'll see that it shows me the whole layout of the whole article in this case. So I can go all the way back to the beginning, but you can see how many pages are in here and where they are, and you can actually click on, if I want to go into that one, I could click on it and it'd go into that particular section. The other cool thing is, since we did a whole landscape versus portrait view, if I were to leave that view open and rotate it to landscape, it shows me all the landscape views as well. So it's kind of you're always in the correct orientation, so the framework picks that up, which is great. The other kind of neat thing is you can actually click the little contents button, and it shows you all of the different contents. And the way they have little icons. I don't know if you can see them or not. We can a little bit here. Shows if there's images on the pages or if there's an arrow for video on the page. So it shows you what kind of content it could be on there. So that is, that's going to probably play. So you can come up and feel free to play with this. I'm going to end a little early just due to the fact that I think it's a little easier to show all this stuff up here than it is on this screen here. So I'm just going to go back home here. So that's kind of some of the stuff. I wanted to show the Lady Gaga and I brainstorm, but basically those do a little. Thanks. So that's basically it. There's who I am. It's my personal blog is merle.com, and my Twitter thing's at Merle, but you can feel free to come on up. Brian has a question.
Yeah, how long did it take you to create the Lady Gaga thing?
Oh, good question. So the Lady Gaga we created in 8 days, and that was with creative and everything. So we managed to start from start to finish. There was only like 3 or 4 of us actually kind of came together. We only actually had one person had the Adobe Digital Publishing Framework and InDesign on his machine because we only had one license for it because it's in like super alpha beta or whatever it is. So he only could do it, so we had to create assets. He created it, so we had it pretty much, and we did quite a few changes with it too. So if you would have saw the first version, you'd have said like, whoa, it looks totally different. So we went through quite a few iterations in a matter of 8 days, like 3 or 4 guys. And again, 0 Objective-C. We did have some guys do the HTML5 stuff, but it was pretty straightforward stuff that they banged out. But yeah, that's a good question. So any other questions before everybody's going to bum rush me to look at this stuff up here?
Your presentation is available on your blog?
I'll put it up there. It's not up there yet, but I'll do a post and I'll put this all up there. Minus the videos probably, because actually I'll just link to the videos because they're on YouTube, the telco app stuff. Any other questions? No, going once. All right, well, thank you, everybody.